I think Charlie wins the award for the travel the furthest to get here. Charlie comes to us from Nome, Alaska. Does anybody beat out Nome, Alaska? Okay. Charlie works with the Norton Sound Economic Development Corporation there in Nome. And he's here to talk about a technique that has been used up there. It's the use of eyed egg injections into the natural spawning gravels to supplement as salmon runs. So he's going to talk about the history, the rationale, and the methods for using these eyed egg injections to supplement the salmon runs there for subsistence purposes in Alaska. So please welcome Charlie Lean.
Hey Charlie, can I ask you a question before you get started? What's a gallon of gas going for in Nome these days, now that you have some?
Well, it's about $6 a gallon, plus or minus 5 cents. There's two companies, 2 gas stations.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep, I'm Charlie Lean. I'm a career fisheries biologist. I had a full career with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. Retired. The federal government picked me up as the Northwest Area Alaska Fisheries Manager for all agencies. I did that for 5 years. And then I went to work for NSCDC, which I've done now for 6 years. And I had gray hair, so they promoted me to the director of the Fisheries Research and Development Program. So I have 2 other biologists that work with me, and they're real sharp young guys, and this is one of them. I figure he's better looking than I. So I wanted to say that the area is awfully similar to here, despite your preconceptions maybe of Alaska and the far north. But I too live in a near desert. You can see the vegetation isn't particularly lush, and a little shorter season. I work for this NSCDC, and I should explain what that is. It's an NGO. I work for a nonprofit corporation, and it's one of 6 in the Bering Sea region that work to keep the local villages from blowing away. The Magnuson-Stevens Act was the tool that established 6 of these CDQ groups, and that's the same regulations or same statutes that established the 200-mile limit, the fisheries management councils that operate on both the east and west coasts of America, and require sustainable management practices for deep sea fisheries. So it was a really important thing, but the problem was in the Bering Sea, with our 30% poverty level, no one could enter these deep sea fisheries. And so as a means of keeping us in the loop, they established CDQ groups and allocated a small percentage of the deep sea fisheries to these 65 communities, and 15 of them united to form NSCDC. So NSCDC, besides managing their fisheries interests, and they own now some major share of the commercial fisheries, they work in the Norton Sound region to and have basically 4 facets: education, community benefits, and the local seafood buying stations, which keep our small commercial fisheries going on shore-based fisheries, and also the program that I manage. So I think I already mentioned, I have 2 career biologists working under my supervision. Together we manage 20-some programs. This missed incubation egg planting thing is one of those. It's certainly doesn't take all my time, not even close. Among other things, we do salmon counting. This is a resistance board. Weir on the Pilgrim River counts red salmon, chum salmon. NSCDC's program has, we do more management projects than the combined state and federal agencies in our region. That's what I do, is I supplement Fish and Game's ability to manage the fisheries in the region. I couldn't resist throwing this picture in. So one of our star crew leaders there is rolling a 500-pound barrel, and she let that young guy help her out. But she's a tough cookie, that lady. Anyway, I'm out there on Salmon Lake. We just heard about assessment work. I have to assess the plankton levels in the lake and send samples off on a regular basis to Alaska Fish and Game. And so, you know, you had a question about assessment work and how you do that. We monitor plankton levels in the lake, we monitor the size of the smolt leaving the lake, and we make judgments about the success of our fertilization program. We do other assessment work, I'll get to that later. The center of the universe. So, at least according to me. So see if I can make this work. Nome, Norton Sound region right here. Just like Governor Palin, I can see Siberia. I'm sorry. Couldn't help myself. The Bering Sea is the most productive sea of its size in the world, and one of the reasons is this shelf edge here, which creates an upwelling zone year-round, and the nutrient-rich cold water coming up from the deep creates a plankton bloom, which in turn feeds a zooplankton community, which in turn feeds a lot of fish, pollock and cod primarily. And then the Arctic ice every winter forms down almost to this line. And when that ice is in situ, it grows algae on the bottom, and when the ice retreats in the spring, it precipitates algae, and it's inoculated by the zooplankton at the shelf edge, and it drags a real productive zone across the sea, and with it come salmon, halibut, sea mammals, everything moves north. So that's what drives our system. This is the Alaska Peninsula. This is Kodiak Island. This is where the egg planting techniques were developed originally. And the first egg plants occurred on Karluk Lake on the north shore of Kodiak Island to reestablish a red salmon run that had been nearly extirpated in the 1930s. And that run today is roughly a quarter of what it once was in the 1930s. The egg planting program lasted 5 years, one generation of red salmon. And what's applied, you know, it at least in part accounts for some of the success of that rehabilitation. I can't say that it's the whole story, but that's the origins of egg planting. Egg pumps evolved from the method that was used back in the 60s and 70s to assess chum salmon spawning success. And they used to take a 55-gallon drum sectioned, and they had a little window cut in it with a net. They jam it on the bottom of the creek before the chums emerged from the river bottom, and would pump water into the gravels, blasting all the little pre-emergent chums up and into this net. They'd weigh and categorize the fish, and that was their indice of spawning success. And so Todd Jones and other people working for Fish and Game at the time said, hey, well, if we can blow them out of the gravel, we can put them back in. So that's where egg pumps that's the short story. Uh, I know that this is a contentious issue here, and many of you in the room are very focused on it, but I can tell you that there are other contentious salmon issues out there, and I live in the town with the most depressed salmon runs in Alaska, and I have been in court twice on this issue for lawsuits against the state. I was a state employee. I have been, we have a board of fisheries that establishes regulations in Alaska and settles allocative issues between the various fishing districts. And I have been grilled before the Board of Fish for 2 days on a single question. It's a highly contentious issue, and it, you know, involves genetics work, and it involves high emotion, and it's a little bit of a black eye for the state of Alaska, who prides itself on having sustainable fisheries and, you know, lots of fish and so forth. So anyway, I'm pretty familiar with that process. We all try to point the finger at the other guy and say, well, they caused the problem, but in truth, Nome has a mining history a lot like Wairika, only it's still going on. We've had a gold rush that's lasted 100 years. There's a new TV show about Nome gold mining. It's a little too close to the truth to be comfortable. So anyway, and we have a predominant native population, and so 65% of Nome meets the BIA Indigenous Persons Standard of at least a quarter blood, and there's a real strong cultural connection to fish. We get people that don't really agree with Western science or conservation, and it's and additionally we have gold miners that are restricted very much with anadromous stream classifications, and so if a stream's anadromous, classified as an anadromous stream, then the mining is really curtailed, and so as you might suspect, the landowners are quite involved about where fish are and what can I do to get rid of these damn things, kind of attitude. So it's when I graduated from college, I thought, you know, I'm going to work with fish and wildlife, and really I've been working with people ever since. So just to get into the Nome situation, salmon runs started to decline in the 60s. Statehood happened in 1959. So no sooner than the state stood up its Fish and Game Office in Nome, they had problems. And so initially ratcheted down, close that stream, close this stream, restrict fishing here and there. The commercial fishery, such as it was, a little fishery, persisted until the mid-80s. I started in the Nome office in 1981. I got to close the commercial fishery. I got to reduce subsistence fishing, and was just a person in a long line of people that were closing things down. You know, we were trying really hard to manage the biology of the situation and keep things going. Nevertheless, we started to see fish runs really disappear. There's 2 streams in Nome that you could say the chum salmon have been extirpated on, at least by Alaskan standards, which is really close to that the 5,500 rule that you heard the other day. So we're, by that standard, 2 streams are extirpated. We started looking around, what can we do in our own backyard? I can't affect the hatchery production in Japan. I can't affect even the commercial fishery on the South Peninsula of Alaska that intercepts a lot of fish bound for Nome. but we can fix our own backyard. So we did a lot of habitat work. We chased the miners out of the creeks. We created spawning beds. We created overwintering ponds. We kind of exhausted our options. And we started to look around and looked at runs that were depressed or extirpated. And we struck on this red salmon lake up at Salmon Lake, and we fertilized the lake and succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. Went from a run size of 5,000 to 85,000. And basically overbrowsed the lake and caused it to crash due to lack of plankton. And so now we've tried to put it back. So now, I started this as a fish and game biologist, and today I'm working in this. I've changed hats, but I'm still doing the same things. So we now fertilize at a much lower rate, and we manage the number of fish going into the lake so that we don't do that again. We monitor the plankton levels, we monitor the size of the smoke going to sea, and we try to hit a mid-range, not too large, because then fish come back too soon, not too small, because then they don't survive at sea at all. So it's a balancing act, and it takes some attention. We're doing that also with egg planting, and I'll show some pictures here pretty soon on that. We tried various forms of hatcheries. The first thing we tried were in-stream incubation boxes, which is kind of a hatchery in a suitcase. It's a little box, a hose coming downstream, water up wells in the bottom of the box goes through interstitial packing. You put the eggs in there, the fry leave volitionally at the end of the season, and we had mixed success. We had many failures in that. We had to quit that because we couldn't assess it. Fish and Game wouldn't give us any more permits, and I was a fish and game biologist to do that. So no assessment, no project. We tried a hatchery. We tried recirculating water. A little hatchery in Nome. The city turned off our water in March when water levels get low in Nome due to the aquifer drying up every winter. They decided humans were more important than fish. So that didn't work. We tried recirculating incubators, and when the eggs hatched, the amniotic fluid came out and caused a fungus bloom, Saffrolignia fungus, and it clogged the system, and that didn't work. And finally, we tried mist incubation and planting the eggs before they hatch, and that has worked. And why did we try mist incubation and eyed egg planting? We wanted something that was, we wanted a project that would work. So we found 2 sites that we thought were great. They'd had fish in the last 20 years. It had been extirpated by mining and overfishing. We could say that a local cause caused this, and it was something we can fix. We went to the Fish and Game and asked for a permit, and they said, I've never heard of that method. Are you guys crazy? And they assigned us a stream that never produced chum salmon naturally. And furthermore, the stream was often about one week a month. The ocean would wash the entrance to the stream closed. So not only didn't produce fish couldn't get there. So you get lemons, you make lemonade. We went and we walked the stream, and we found a place where we thought there would be thawed water year round. the lower parts of this stream freeze down completely. And we got some eggs from the Nome River, which is just a mile away, and planted eggs in this site. And 4 and 5 years later, we had returns of chum salmon, and when you tallied up the adults that returned, it equaled the number that we had used to take eggs. So a 1-to-1 sort of success rate in a place that never produced a wild fish. And all the chum that returned to that stream were marked with our thermal mark that we applied during incubation. So I can honestly say that those were our fish. So once we demonstrated that, hey, you know, we could see that there were emergence the next spring. And of course we ran to Fish and Game and said, see, we can do it. And they grudgingly gave us small permits then to work on the Snake River and the Nome River, which we did. And so today we do a Coho project on the Snake River, a chum salmon project on the Snake River. Another guy was working the Nome River, and we moved off that to the Salmon River. All these streams are in easy reach of Nome, and they're all very small. It's a real economic operation. The incubator cases are the smallest ones the size of this podium, and the 2 larger ones I have are slightly, maybe twice the size of this. They sit in a room that already existed. The egg pumps didn't cost that much. The setup costs $13,000 a big incubator and about $1,000 a pump. So we spend $12,000 a year on assessment. It uses just minimal water, a couple hundred gallons for the entire season, and it's easy to heat or cool. The costs are just minuscule. So, and I can pack up one of these things and send it anywhere I want. And because it doesn't cost very much, decommissioning is, you know, pretty straightforward. So, and it was permit worthy, and in fact, today, Fish and Game's considering a put and take fishery in one of the streams right in center town. So another thing that you may find interesting is that these eggs they're planted about a week before they're going to hatch, and you stick them in your preferred sites, and so the fish are born in the wild basically, and they're subject to all the selective pressures that a wild spawn fish is subject to. It. We roughly double the fertilization rate by artificial fertilization methods. But after that, it's pretty much up to Mother Nature. Hatcheries, at least in Alaska, tout cohos to say that they believe they have about 10% survival from fertilization to smolt. I don't even come close. I can't really tell you what the success rate is at smolt because we don't sample the smolt to see if they're ours or not. I can tell you that I get about I've had between 70 to 90% to planting, which is just a week shy of hatching. So I'd say I think that's a pretty firm survival rate. And on Coho, the first year that we had a return was 6 to 1, 6 returning adults for every 1 taken for eggs. The next year was 10 to 1. and last year was about 5-1. And we're talking really small egg takes, so in the order of 30 pairs, 30, 60 fish, with a 1-to-1 fertilization rate. Egg pumps are not only used for putting eggs in the gravel, but they can be used to break up concretion. And then we have a lot of that because of the mining in Nome. So we go out and we find a prospective spawning bed that has the right gravel and so forth, and we just start working the gravel. And it, of course, we do this when there's no eggs or elevens in the gravel, and before the adults have returned. So it's usually a early summer activity. And I make a game out of it sometimes. I've used the junior ROTC guys, young high school students to do this, or I've also used a couple of youth groups. And we have 3 egg pumps, and everybody gets a turn, and it kind of develops ownership of the stream bed, and it helps me to keep permits with the landowners. Many of the mining claims were made in Nome prior to statehood, and they own the river bottoms. The mining claims include anadromous streams. The state owns the water and the fish. I can do about 30 minutes. Okay, I'll wrap it up. Oh, darn. You get me going and I can't shut up. Anyway, so egg pumps are good. I'm going to go really fast now. This is assessment work. We're checking out a potential Coho site. Sandra's got a YSI meter. She's checking oxygen, and I'm over there with a homemade piezometer. It's a pipe with a tube on the side. I can tell if it's upwelling, downwelling, what the interstitial flow is in the gravel. It's a very relative measure, but it lets me know if there's interstitial flow or not, which is really important. It also tells me how dense the gravel is and will the egg pumps work in it. That site failed, by the way. Pink salmon like pea gravel, chum salmon like 2" and minus, Coho salmon like 4" and minus, king salmon like 6" and minus. Usually the water velocity determines the substrate size. King salmon like to be in a downwelling situation. Most other salmon like to be in an upwelling situation. Accumulated temperature units. Here's some graphs. So the blue line, Basin Creek, is a very good chum salmon spawning habitat, and we compared it to a prospective site, Manila Creek. And what you see here is that Basin Creek is just 50 ATUs, 1,050 ATUs, but 50 ATUs over the desired temperature regime that we were looking for. And Manila Creek slightly below that, about 50 below. We planted in Manila Creek. We were able to, in the incubation process, make up for that deficit. And by planting in a less than prime spot, we were assured that we were not displacing wild spawned eggs. So we avoided a conflict, yet we were close enough to prime habitat that we judged it to be a good site. These are Coho temperature profiles, and Moonlight Springs is a nice Coho spot, the blue line. Aggie Creek was the picture with the girl and I, and you can see that there's some really weird things going on there, and that what that indicates is that it had a water shortage midsummer and had a water shortage in the early winter, and we failed it. The Hobson Creek is a massive big spring, just blows cold water year round, 2 degrees Celsius water. I got a big kick out about you guys' cool water here, 13 degrees, yeah. It's not Nome, okay. But anyway, so the ATUs were appropriate at Hobson Creek if you use this incubation method, but we haven't done that because cohos require rearing habitat, and the Nome River rearing habitat is well utilized already. So although the site would work, we didn't do it. And really fast now. So I'm gonna go seining, catch some broodstock, chum salmon, coho salmon, seining. Cohos, if we get 10 ripe pairs in a seine set, we're pretty happy. And chums, we do a lot better. Here we got a lot of college kids working for me, but there's a 72-year-old guy helping out, and we've got red salmon mixed with chum salmon and pink salmon. We have to sort, and we sort it all out, and then we sort by sex, males and females, into net pens, and then we sort again for ripeness. We throw a male or two in the females for pheromones to accelerate the ripening process. We stun the females and cut their caudal arteries. If you get blood on eggs, it makes the eggs, you can't fertilize them. Lots of knife action here. We put the eggs in Ziploc bags, take them back to the lab for fertilization. We have about a 6-hour shelf life on eggs. We have about a 3-hour shelf life on milk. It means we have to hustle, you know. Once we start taking eggs, we're on the clock. We mix them about a minute to fertilize. We water harden for an hour. 15 minutes of that hour has a betadine solution to get away from IHN disease. And then they go into incubators. We have a lot of kids looking over our shoulders. A lot of people have some ownership in these projects. This is one of the larger incubators. It will hold roughly 300,000 coho eggs, about 2,000 to 200,000 chum, 250,000. Here we are egg planting, chums. Got eggs in the box. We've got egg pumps. We pushed the egg pumps about 9 inches into the gravel, let the water run from the backpack pump through there till the water clears, turn the water off at the valve by the person's chest there, and then open the funnel, pour the eggs down it, gently remove the pipe, move over 18 inches and repeat. It's, you know, you have to take a little care, but anybody could do this. We run in 2 crews here, taking care not to step on the area already planted, working side by side, 18-inch centers. Temperatures are right around freezing. And we do egg plants for coho about December 1st. This summer, or this past fall, it was -5 degrees Fahrenheit. We had to keep the eggs submerged so that we don't frostbite them. The pipe kills a few eggs because it's very cold. And we had the water pump, the gas engine, the water pump gradually cooled down, couldn't maintain its operation. But anyway, we got them all in the gravel, and we probably had a 5% mortality right there in the egg planting. Yeah, moments of opportunity. You know, trying to get the Anvil Creek rehabilitated to the point where I could plant eggs in it or run these hatcheries and things. I had to work with a mining company. They were, as I explained, loath to create any more baggage than they had to, but I talked them into it by explaining why it was a wonderful opportunity for them in a PR project. There's been some notable failures in that regard, and it's really important to have landowners buy into it. This is a parent, but he's also a gold miner. This is junior high age kids. It's a charter school. These are 5th and 6th grade kids. If you can get the kids to come along, you can get the parents. It's everybody feels good. Here's one of my crews from 2 years ago. All these kids have now moved on. They're college kids. Kevin's still with me. He's the biologist, but works for the Eskimo Nanook Commission, has a degree in anthropology, a degree in economics, a journalist in Fairbanks, Miss Indian World, and an athlete in the Arctic Winter Games. She'll probably become a politician and later in life. All these people are I call them alumni. They are people that worked successfully for me and will probably someday say kind things about projects that we did. Anyway, and you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, and you can't plant fish without losing a few. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Let's round of applause. Okay, well, we certainly learned a lot and gave Charlie a little extra time when somebody comes 5,000 miles to tell you about what he's doing. He gets a little extra time. We have some ways to make it back up. We'll tell you about it shortly. But let's have some questions for Charlie. I'm sure there are some.
Charlie, once you talked about how you took a stream where there were no fish, and then you did the iodine injection, and then fish returned. I was curious, you may have said it and I didn't hear it. Are the populations self-sustaining after you've done that, or how many times do you need to repeat that for that to happen?
No, well, the second generation is due back next summer, so I can't say that they haven't come back, or they will come back. I suspect they won't. Not without me going down there and opening the creek every day to the ocean.
Are there instances where you were able to, I guess, do this process and then natural spawning takes over for the iodine injection?
We've been doing this 7 years, including that project. So on the Coho, we did see fish return and spawn, and we think we saw emergence, but we didn't, they're not marked. And so it's difficult to say that that's true or not. So I don't know.
Okay, I've got Keith and Renee wanted to ask a question. Go ahead, Keith.
Hey, Charlie, I'm the current hatchery manager up here at Iron Gate, and we are new to obtaining moist air incubators. Instead of boring everybody with the details of that, I'd like to bend your ear after the program today with the technical details. Just a quick question now, is your thermal marking done in your incubators, and is it otolith marking?
Yes, it's otolith marking. It's done just prior to release because that's when the bones are forming in the embryo.
Okay, and then what's your incubation time from fertilization to?
It depends on temperature a lot. So I mean,
At what temperature do you incubate?
as cold as I can get it.
Okay,
So it takes 2.5 months for Coho,
wow,
and it would take you less than a month, I think.
yes.
So
Any fungus problems in your incubators?
yeah, very much so at times, and saltwater treatments work very well.
Okay, we can talk more about it later. Thank you.
Okay, Renee, you're next.
Maybe I missed this, great presentation, but do you have an adaptive, or is this part of an adaptive management plan where you have some sort of, threshold for returns that you need to see, and you're ultimately planning to phase out the egg injections, and/or when you're capturing the fish to get the eggs from, do you have numbers where if you see fewer than X number of fish, you don't take any, or how does all of that going to work in the future?
Yes. So the Department of Fish and Game's genetics shop sets desired limits, and for Coho it's 63 pairs per year. And frequently I fall far short of that, as I mentioned, 30, and nobody's pulled my permit yet. And the reason for that is that they have another policy that says I can't take more than 10% of the natural return for broodstock. So that's another rule I do abide by. And frequently the 10% rule is what caps me. I forgot the other question.
And is there a plan to, if you see runs, like to phase out the egg injections or?
In the case of Anvil Creek, the Coho thing, we were gonna go 4 years, 4 sequential years. And because of low numbers in the river, we went 3 years and then had to not plant for 2 years, and now we planted again last year. And so we didn't get our 4 years in a row. So in the meantime, the 3 years that returned were so successful that now there's a big push in Nome. The half or 2/3 of the return came up Anvil Creek where we intended it to jumpstart the extricated run. 1/3 of it went up another stream that runs right through center town. Very unattractive site for a biologist. Literally runs between houses and so forth. And the fish like it. And they're spawning there. And now, and I mean, the kids, you just can't keep people out of the stream. They're running down there and taking fish home. So now there's a big push in town to do a put and take fishery, basically plant and sacrifice all the catch there.
Christian, and then Carlos. Okay, and then I'll add the other folks on.
A quick comment actually is we helped the Shoshone-Bannock tribe in Idaho with a project they're doing to reintroduce extricated steelhead up there. And one of the things that we found is by taking genetic samples from the parents, instead of using an otolith mark, you can then collect juveniles or collect fish at any stage to figure out which fish are from that project, and not label the sample to estimate the success.
I enjoyed your presentation. I was particularly struck though by the team of biologists with the pumps marching down through the stream and wondering whether there isn't an issue with disturbing existing reds for other species or even naturally spawned fish there. And what's your experience with that? And do you guys have some way of making sure you're not disturbing those reds?
Okay, so on the Coho planting and on the Salmon Creek, the Manila Creek planting, we purposely avoided places where wild fish spawn. So, I mean, they're not possible, and so we just don't have to walk on our own. The water's clear. You can see where you pumped, and so I can say with great assurance we don't lose eggs that way. But on the Snake River chum, we've been required to place a plastic mesh, a net, on the bottom and peg it down early in the season, and that way we don't displace wild pink salmon that could spawn there. And so that's how we've avoided that. And we do try to minimize our foot traffic in the river and try to walk on non-viable sites, like really shallow things that we know will freeze down in the winter months.
Okay, Rick, you're next, and then Kim.
One of the things that attracted the county to this sort of technique was the ability to involve the community in the technique. You can put kids to work through the schools. One of the things that we're struggling with, certainly the RCD and people working on these salmon issues, is we're an inland community. Fish are pretty well shot by the time they get here. Nobody really wants to eat them, and it's hard to really form a connection into the whole salmon life cycle thing. And one of the opportunities that I see for a technique like this is that it does help establish ownership in the community to these fish when kids are involved. Like you said, that you you get the kids and you bring the parents along. Could you expand on that notion for a little bit, talk a minute or two to explain that value as you see it to this technique?
Well, first of all, I work for a company that its stated purpose is to facilitate local management of the fisheries. And so other portions of the company do a lot of education. My role in this is I reach out to anyone that's interested to help me with this, adults and high school people. Of course, there's liability issues, OSHA and so forth, about who can do what. But there's a lot of non-mechanical things that we do that are insurable. There's a high portion of residents in Nome that live a subsistence lifestyle that, harvest food from the land for majority of their diet. And so they're under duress at times to feed themselves. And so there's a low regard for fishing game management, and this is one of those things where you get to explain applied biology to people and get them to buy in a little bit anyway into conservation principles. So I really work at the youth. A person my age has pretty well got their mind made up. But if I can get a chink in the armor with high school age or even college age kids, it'll pay off in the end. And I have, over the years, I've worked in Nome now 30 plus years. There are mid-career school teachers that worked for me long ago, and people like that, they offer a very objective view to their students. They've lived a subsistence lifestyle as a child, and then they worked for Fish and Game and got to see all the real deal, with management and the crises that we went through and so forth. And when they talk to their kids, they present, I think, a balanced view of the real issues. So it's, I don't have people following me around as just, total converts, but I do, I have some street credibility about projects we work in, and the company does too. And it's,
Okay, last question will be, Kim, could you introduce yourself for everybody?
My name is Kim Matson, and I'm working with the Quartz Valley Indian Reservation in Scott Valley. My question is maybe two things here. I'm curious on the success and the rationale of doing this. You're trapping fish in a stream, and you're taking the eggs out of them and then putting them back in the stream. You moved them to a new stream they couldn't get to. Is that what you said, the reason for doing that?
right. So the Snake River is a fair-sized system, probably on the order of Shasta, and Anvil Creek is a fork of it that's well downstream, far downstream, and in the interval between the mouth of Anvil Creek and the spawning beds further up the Snake River is a long reach of sandy bottom that is devoid of vegetation and devoid of any kind of rocky cover or anything. So when we got to Anvil Creek and the run had been wiped out, we first minnow trapped and we found no rearing coho. So we had a vacant rearing habitat, a proven site that had once carried fish, and it seemed like a high chance of success, so we went for it.
I had another question on that. You mentioned some interesting statistics on your survival. You said Alaska mentioned a 10% survival from fertilization to smolt. And
I made a mistake.
oh, well,
Yep.
that's not important. I think I was curious, can you tell me how good your survival is, or how your success is? You mentioned a 10-to-1, a 6-to-1, and a 5-to-1. Or say something about your survival, how your success is.
Well, that's I guess that's the whole story right now. Those, how many returns we've had from.
I guess I didn't know what those numbers were.
For every 10 adults returned for every one that was taken for eggs. 10 to 1. 10, we got 10 adults back. So if I took a pair of fish, I would have gotten 20 adults back on a 10 to 1 survival.
Maybe you can talk afterwards
Yep.
and clarify that.
Yep.
All right, so let's give Charlie another big round of applause.